Good evening. It's a great honor to introduce Brewster Kahle, who's truly an open source hero. And in order to explain this, we can look at a few statistics, of course, provided by Brewster Kahle's own Alexa search engine, which became an element of Amazon. So we can ask silly questions like how popular is Google, and he just has a rank of 1, and it hasn't changed, and it's kind of a flat line. And data often tells us something that we didn't expect. And here we expected something more dynamic when I looked at it, at least. And there is nothing dynamic about it. It's just number 1. There it is. But if we look at other sites, like Stanford, for example, there's a very interesting dynamic going on here. And it might have something to do with the fact that people are applying to college. And when they do, they start researching Stanford. And so there's a huge difference in relevance over the year. Now, I also found out that the top search term, apart from Stanford itself, for Stanford is, what do you think it is? Football. No, Sergey Brin. And why? Because Sergey Brin has a homepage, and it's the Stanford computer science homepage that he created back in 1996, when all this started, or was it 97? When all this started. And so that's the number 2 most searched term that brings us to Stanford. Fascinating, but what's even more popular than Stanford.edu is archive.org, the organization that Brewster Kahle has conceived in 1996 and that just celebrated its 20th anniversary. You can see its global rank is 257, and you got a plus 66, Brewster, because of the celebration, I think. Yeah.
We're on our way up.
20 years, so right on. We're looking up there. And the point of these slides is that I want you to appreciate how Brewster thinks of problems not as stories to be told, but as situations that require a different kind of structure. And so whenever he sees a challenge, he sees an opportunity to create a new structure that will deal with that challenge in a different way. And I find that profoundly inspiring. So many other people do that too. So here's the quiz about Brewster Kahle. Brewster created several organizations before creating the Internet Archive. Which did he not help create? And so it turns out he did create all of these, helped create all of these. So there is, it's all of the above. And I guess the correct answer would be none of the above, right? So Alexa.com, your early project, Thinking Machines, also an early project. BitTorrent, is that true?
Part of
BitTorrent.
Yeah.
Archive.org, obviously,
Yes.
is a mainstay. Waze is a very early publishing tool which dealt with how do you publish documents and make them searchable online, a question we're still grappling with to some extent. And of course, Amazon.com, which now has this little box, the hardware that's called Alexa 2, maybe for some reason, that resonates with the acquisition of Alexa early on by Amazon as a search engine for finding products. Sounds about right? Good. And then, of course, there's a reflection of Brewster Kahle's work, and we have here a list of institutions that he might be a member of. And again, the correct answer is all of the above. Okay, none of the above. He's not a member of none of these. He's a member of all of them. Internet Hall of Fame, Academy of Arts and Sciences, National Academy of Engineering, Electric Frontier Foundation, very powerful organizations, and the Library of Congress, which is just now re-envisioning its digital identity, and the National Science Foundation for Advisory Committee for Cyber Infrastructure. If we take a look back, the first time I got in contact with the thinking of Brewster Kahle was this 1996 article about a wide area view of how we access documents through search engine based on Waze. And at that time, it was so cool to hold up the glass globe on your fingertip, and a lot of things changed since then. One thing that didn't change is that the key question is, how do we keep content free and alive, and how can we create open technologies as hedge against proprietary systems? This was in 1996 an obvious challenge, and the amazing thing is it still is today, perhaps ever more. And I'm very, very engaged in this question as well. Just to illustrate 1996, in 1996 it seemed like PDF was a really great way to illustrate, to create a layout for a web page. So you see this ad here that was on the page next to this page. It's the kind of thing you find out if you dig into archives, right? You don't just get the actual piece of information you're looking for, but also the context. And the context was that Adobe just came out with Adobe Acrobat then as a way to improve better web layouts, to create better web layouts. So CSS was not a topic then. PDF was one. And of course, as we now know, PDF turned out to be useful in a completely different way than was initially imagined. This notion of things converting from one thing that we imagined to another was also a guiding principle for archive.org, which constantly reinvents itself. Archive.org is an organization that's been running for 20 years, just celebrated its 20th anniversary last week. And this is Brewster Kahle's home, as it were, his work home, and it's in a church in San Francisco that was reconfigured to hold all the servers, and it's a beautiful building, a great place to visit. Get a lot of mail too, because there's a lot of hardware being delivered in there that gets digitized. And the question always is, what are we going to do with all this information? How are we going to keep it accessible? How are we going to keep it free and open? And what kinds of interfaces allow us to see the information that really matters? With that question, I'd like to ask you to help me welcome Brewster Kahle.
Gosh, thank you. So the Internet Archive, have people used archive.org? No. A little bit. Okay. All right. Okay. It's the idea was to try to build the internet into the Library of Alexandria version 2. Could we make all the published works of humankind available to anybody, anywhere, at any time? That was the idea of the Internet Archive. We started by collecting the World Wide Web. So we have the Wayback Machine. It's awesome. It's used a lot. And then we also digitized books, music, video, and put it online. I guess if Google's the Microsoft, we're the Linux. Sort of as a way of viewing the. And really, I started this whole thing because I was an AI guy at MIT, and we seemed starved for data. We were sort of trying to build smart machines, but there's nothing to compute on. So I said, how hard could that be? So why don't we just do it all? And so it's taken a lot longer than I thought. But we've got these enormous collections, and the hope out of this is that you guys will either take and run with it or use it in some different ways, or so I'm hoping this is concretely useful. If you kind of go out of this and say, yeah, that's cool, wow, kind of interesting. I've absolutely lost. The key thing is okay, I can do something here with this. What I thought I'd do for tonight is show one project, some things that are done with a collection that we've got, as kind of an illustration of some of the things. So think of it as an illustration, not a breadth. So it's a deep rather than a breadth. And then I'm going to give it about what we should do about this World Wide Web thing, which is sort of problematic, because the web, as Snowden has pointed out, is deeply flawed in its architecture. And I have a suggestion of what we can do about that. So first, let's just go for a particular project we've got. We've been collecting television for the last 17 years. Russian, Chinese, Japanese, Iraqi, Al Jazeera, BBC, CNN, ABC, Fox, 24 hours a day, DVD quality for 16 years. It's enormous. We've got now, we're recording about 60 channels from 25 countries. It's going well. We've made the television news searchable, so that everybody can be the Jon Stewart Research Department. You can basically go and key in what people said, find news snippets, and go for it. We wanted to go further than that with around the television ads around the political season that we're in the middle of. So we're now recording 4 channels from 20 places in the United States. So 4 channels, 24 hours a day, and we're strafing that and using that as data to find all of the political ads. So we basically find the political ads, often using humans, and then we use machines to go and find all of the replicas anywhere else in the whole data set by using audio fingerprints. And we've tried to make this then end user useful to people. So for instance, if you want before July 1st, which would be primary seasons, or let's say we just want after July 1st, this is a map on political ad archive that's 143,000 ads, and you can go dive in and be able to see, some particular area, and here are some ads from that particular. This is an ad, for instance, and it says where it was shown when, over what period of time. You can download it and see it. You can watch the ad, and it's been used by PolitiFact as a fact to go and help sort of debug them. I don't know how the bandwidth is for visitors like me. It doesn't look good. So this is a mechanism that we have for helping people understand what's going on, and being able to dive into particular areas. But we found this was not good enough to be able to help people find their way through. This is one of my favorite uses of this particular collection. We took the political debate and we audio fingerprinted it. And then we looked for those pieces of the debate to find out where those quotes were in other places in the ecosystem of the news. And we limited ourselves to just U.S. news. We actually also have done this across Vietnam. What did Vietnam react to and the like? And we gave this data set to some newspapers, and they ran with it. And this was, I think, a particularly good one. This is the duration of the debate, and this is how often that snippet appears on MSNBC's after the debate coverage. Make sense? So that was something that was quoted a lot, actually, across all of these. So women, cyber attacks, nobody cared. So there's other things, and there's real biases between these different clusters. And if you scroll down, I think they did a beautiful job. As it sort of sees this bar going across the top, and to sort of say, okay, this is what was going on here, and so this is the Miss Universe thing. Right, so it's really trying to give an idea of stepping back. One of my favorite people is Jesse Ausubel, and he said we got really, really far by having a microscope. What would happen if we had a macroscope? What would it mean to be able to go and see the big picture? And I think we'd see the world very, very differently. And these are some of the attempts towards doing that. Let's see another. This is another kind of, I think, a really fun one. We went and took all of the ads that were going on in, actually, oops, I'm going to have to not use Firefox for this. I'm going to have to go to Chrome. We gave what were all of the occurrences of ads in Iowa. And this group at the Atlantic went and took it and ran with it. And they said, okay, let's try to give people an idea of what it's like to be in Iowa. And this little guy is a couch that I'm controlling. And we're now in the middle of the night. Easy peasy, right? So we're in the middle of the night. Each column here is a channel in Iowa. So if you're watching TV, here's some ads. Okay, I'm going to try to avoid ads. Okay, okay, so we're still in the middle of the night. There's a clump of ads. And, we got some Hillary Clintons coming in. And, Marco Rubio, there's Ted Cruz. Shit. Okay, I'm doing pretty well. You see, I've got the little smiley faces on the top. You may think this is easy. I do. I think I'm doing great. But as the day wears on, and this is actually real time, these ads are that long through the day. So some of these stations have just piles and piles. Oh shit. And so this is just a way of trying to understand just sort of what it's like. Whoa, to be in Iowa. And just get slaughtered with ads. And so this is, it's game over. So oops, I kind of lost. So that's just a data treatment that we just thought was particularly awesome. This is a project by Kahle, who basically does data analytics on things like all of the mentions of different candidates' names across all television over time. and it just shows Donald Trump. It's just swamping. I mean, you look back in the primaries, I mean, he's mentioned more than everybody else combined, right? And so you can start to get kind of an idea of what it is that's going on out there in sort of a new and different way by going and breaking things down, by going and doing data analyses on the world's data. Let's see, this is his analyses of debate number 3 and sort of when they're quoted a lot in different places, and there are links into all of the places they've been quoted. So let's see if I'm now here. Here's where they occurred, and I can then.
No, I'll look at it at the time. Are you saying you're not prepared now to what I'm saying? I will tell you at the time. I'll keep you in suspense.
Oh, he's so freaking awesome. So this is ways of trying to help give a macro view to the whole thing. And this is an example of PolitiFact that took one of the ads from us. Here it is. This is embedded from us, and this one's mostly true.
Where we speak English, not Spanish.
And so this is sort of PolitiFact. So basically just trying to pull apart the media so people can do new and different things with it. So I just wanted to give kind of a deep dive of how it's actually been quite hard for us to try to get this so that it's journalist ready. It's been a real struggle. I thought that we'd be able to do just sort of broad capture and people would run with it. Turns out it's a lot harder than that. To try to get it so that people like the New York Times could run with it. Even though they did a lot of work, it took us a lot of work to try to get it so that data sets were together. So this is just an example. I'm hoping it's sort of in your sphere of data and journalism, computation and journalism. The sorts of collection sizes we're dealing with are in petabytes. It takes thousands of computers to go and run over these sorts of things, but this kind of thing is available, and it's available to you now because we've been building this stuff. And the idea is to try to make these things more useful in more different ways as possible. So this is sort of a little advertisement, if you will, for the collections to see if you can make use of it. So I'm going to shift gears. I'm going to suggest that there is this existing projects of the Internet Archive to digitize everything and make them put them on the web in an open way. Digitizing 1,000 books every day and collecting all this television. We're in the process of just gearing up to do all 78 RPM records. We've gotten almost all CDs, and then try to help make these as accessible as we can without getting sued. So that's the so how do you do that? What's a library mean when everything's copyrighted? What's the difference between being a library and publishing? Is a lot of the world that we get to try to balance. But the more you guys go and use these things and need these things, the more we can exist, and we'll have our 30th anniversary rather than being buried under a pile of lawsuits. So that's the old into the current. Go and collect all the current, whether it's television or web or apps or whatever. But then there's looking forward. It turns out that the World Wide Web was not designed to be archived at all. And as the web becomes less page-oriented and more application-oriented, like Google Docs and stuff like that, the harder it is. Also, it's a big surveillance network, as we've now found out through Snowden. I guess we always knew it, but we just didn't face it until we basically now can't avoid it. So we've got a system that is a bit problematic. But the good thing is that millions of people have been putting their whole lives into the web. And the way that the web works predicts a lot of how we live our lives online. One of my favorite guys, who used to be a professor here, Larry Lessig, code is law. The way the web is coded determines a lot of how we live our lives online. So if we're going to have a web that we want, we should have the values that we want in the code of the web, but it's not there. We have a problem. But there is good news is it's huge. We collect about 500 million pages every week to make the Wayback Machine. There's a massive number of people going and making this available, but it isn't that available to everybody. It's kind of available unless you happen to be, say, in China, or until recently in Russia. You couldn't get to the Internet Archive at all. If you go to China, you can't get to the New York Times, or you can't get to Google, for instance, from China. So the web is not reliable. It basically, the web pages blink on and off websites every 100 days on average is the lifetime of a web page before it's either changed or deleted. So it's not a reliable medium. It's not consistently available. It's also not private. That if you stand in one place in front of a website, you can see everybody coming there, and that would be useful for some people. For instance, the GCHQ watched all, which is the British NSA, watched everyone going to WikiLeaks, collected all of those people and turned them over to the NSA. The NSA had a conversation internally that we know because of Snowden, that of what to do with these people, of whether to use their, basically tick up in terms of basically suspects. And we don't know whether that happened or not, but it was discussed. And the library world has had a long tradition of dealing with regimes where people are corralled for things that they've read and bad things happening to them. So this is in action now, so we don't have a very private thing. So it's not very reliable, it's not private, but it is fun. So I would say out of the three big winner things that we want out of the web is reliable, private, and fun, and we only have 1 out of 3, right? And so I would suggest we try to go for 3 out of 3, and I would hope we could do this in a way that's a smooth upgrade of the existing web. I'm going to try to argue that this is possible, but it's still early days. So this is the looking forward. So what do I mean by a distributed web? Well, the distributed or decentralized in the same sense that the internet is, that you can basically nuke any particular part of it and it still works. So the web doesn't work that way. You go and take out a particular piece of hardware in the web and the website goes down. And it's unless you're using something like Amazon Cloud or something like that, which is sort of a decentralized system, but still owned and controlled by a single company. So Amazon, which has data centers all over the world, is in some sense trying to build a decentralized aspect to the content distribution systems of the net, but it's owned and controlled. So what if we could do some of that, but in the open? If we were to take our dream case of what else we'd want out of the web, is we'd want to make it so that it has reader privacy, so that it wouldn't be dangerous for you to click on a link. If you start to make it so that you're going to be watching your back every time you click on a link or read something that you feel you're kind of dumb about, then that is going to decrease its use. If we're going to really rethink this, let's put a time machine into the web. The Wayback Machine goes and takes snapshots of what web pages look like, not how they act. So can we make it so that the web becomes a way that people can move on from their project, their website, and have it still work? Is there a way for professors or students to go and do their cool project and wrap it up and have it continue to live, even though they're not supporting it anymore? Can we do that? I would say yes, we can. I'll suggest a couple ways about it. And let's make it so you can actually make money by publishing on the net. We really blew that the first time around, and I'm somewhat guilty for that. I was in the wrong kind of organization, Thinking Machines, and then sold to AOL. And the reason why I sold Ways Incorporated to AOL was because they had a business model. It was a royalty-based business model, and they flipped it on their heads. Said maybe we should charge people for getting to our eyeballs. Remember that era? Let's talk about eyeballs. Anyway, instead of a royalty model, which I kind of like, they flipped it around, and I left. So let's make make it so that you can actually make money by publishing on the web. How do we do all of this? Well, there are some tools that Tim Berners-Lee didn't have 25 years ago. For instance, public key encryption was illegal to distribute. Encryption was illegal to distribute when the web was started. We also now have JavaScript, which is pretty amazing, tool to go and make it so you can make your web browser into a computing platform that's distributed by code that comes down to your machine. So you don't have to just display code, you can actually compute. There's blockchain and Bitcoin, where are decentralized systems for both databases and for money. So how are we doing towards any of this? Well, there is some progress. There are a bunch of projects that are mostly bottom up by younger people to go and build some of these decentralized distributed systems. But what about a bold goal? I would suggest, why don't we try WordPress but distributed? Can we make something as easy as making a WordPress blog, but make it so that it could live everywhere and nowhere? So this blog would have code in it, databases, search engines, things like that. It would be easy to customize. You could have identities. You could say you're an admin, you're an editor, you're just a commenter. You could have, but it lives everywhere and nowhere. So it is distributed in a BitTorrent-like way, such that it you can take it down in any particular point. You can go and put up a wall, and it would still go. Can we do this? Well, I would say we need these pieces to make it go. A normal browser, right? So there's no upgrades required. It's not like, oh, you've got to go and download this new thing. Good names so that you can have something like Brewster's blog, snappy performance, fun to post and comment, but also we want it to be reliable with versions like a big giant GitHub. It is possible to do this. So this is with JavaScript, I was blown away just in the last year by this project at the Internet Archive, working with these communities to go and bring back old software. And the way that they did it is they took an emulator of old PCs and Apples and things like that and cross-compiled the C code into JavaScript. It runs inside your browser. And then it boots up an IBM PC, and then it loads a virtual floppy, and it's not 1984, but it thinks it's 1984 because it's in this little emulated universe. It works, and it works at speed. So you can't do a really fast computer yet in your browser, but you can do one that's 10 years old. So if you can go and emulate a full computer in JavaScript that you just downloaded interactively over the net, that means you can build things on it. And the idea of building a whole web on it is quite possible. So here's a little, I'm going to attempt a demo, which is usually death in front of a, and here, let me try it. This is my blog. Hey, it worked. Woohoo! Okay, so you see this encrypto thing at the top? It just went out and used this hash of my blog and looked for it out on the net and pulled back the pieces to be my blog. So it actually worked where this thing is not coming from a website, even though there's a gateway address here, and it has a search engine in it, albeit slow. Looks like that's still coming down. And you can click around and see a blog. So the idea here is to be able to, and that's of course the recursion here. Here's another blog post. So this is sort of an example, a primitive example of a blog that lives everywhere and nowhere, and it's still fairly snappy. So JavaScript can go and make it so that we can have a layer in between our browser and the outside world that allows a whole lot to happen that you don't actually see. So it's a computing layer that it makes this quite doable. We need easy names. There's different approaches to doing this using things like the blockchain, performance with versions, so that we want it to be very fast, but we also want to be able to dial time back. Updates, mutable torrents is now doable. distributed identity system in such a way that you can be anonymous yet consistently known. So you can basically use any number of identities that you might want to use. You might want to use one and have it accumulate reputation, but you can always walk away from an identity. We can have a WordPress, but distributed. So it's a hand wave, it's a quick hand wave, but the idea that we can actually build a decentralized web. So the idea here is that we're at a point that if we wanted to, we could go and build a new structure and be able to lock the web open. We could go and make openness irrevocable. So it is not possible, given an open web browsers, even in current, to make it go away. We could bake the First Amendment into the code itself. That we could make it so that we have a private, reliable, versioned World Wide Web. I bring this up because Greg said this is sort of the forward-looking nature of the group that's built here. But I think it is something that is possible to do and build. The status of it is we pulled together Vint Cerf, Tim Berners-Lee, the head of Mozilla, as sort of the gray hair set, and a lot of the people on those projects, a sort of scrolling list of projects, and said, can we build this? And these younger folks are starting to come together with the pieces to say, yes, we can actually build this. And the key idea of having the Tim Berners-Lees and the Vint Cerfs and the Brewster Kahles around is to build a heat shield for these people so that basically they're not picked off, kind of the way Bitcoin has been picked off, or BitTorrent has been sort of tarred and feathered. That these technologies are really actually very useful, but they're challenging just to the status quo. And so going and building a structure around these people so that they can actually get their projects mature enough. The internet itself, the basic ARPANET going to the internet was also very threatening. And also same thing with the World Wide Web and the Waze protocols. So there were reasons to go and do that, and that was why we did that. So that's my talk. I think we still have a little bit of time. Can I answer any questions?
Where does that JavaScript leave?
Where does the JavaScript leave? So these are files that are called up by hash. It's basically a content addressable web. Right now we have addresses that tell you where you're supposed to go, and then you ask it a string, a URL, and it hands you something back. A content addressable world is one where you have hashes and you ask for it. Now you say, how do you bootstrap yourself up? And yes, you have to get the basic JavaScript to run somehow to begin. And what Tim Berners-Lee ended this particular session with an interesting thing. He said that JavaScript is polyfill. And I didn't know what polyfill was. And it's British spackle. So it's basically, it's the thing that you can go and make up future things that may be built into the system later. So this JavaScript to go and do the basic finding of files, if we build it in JavaScript and distribute it and show that it's popular, then the browser makers and the standards committees can go and bake it in. But the key idea, and it's been a real mind screw for me, is the concept of content addressability. That if you have the hash of it, you don't care where it comes from because you can bring it down and check that it has the right checksum, if you will. And it's so hard to go and make a fake one of those that it's the age of the universe kind of thing to do. So if you just have its hash, then you can get it from anywhere. That's the concept of how BitTorrent works and all the other peer-to-peer systems work. We can actually do that snappy at the web scale at this point.
Yes, I'm a great admirer of your work as far as putting all this information together in Internet Archive. But the case you made about these technologies blockchain and IPFS and so on, that they would actually deliver freedom of speech or privacy, I think it needs this by very far what is needed. I think that even if these technologies by themselves could actually isolate from the vulnerability of the endpoint in which they're running.
Yes.
They assume the fact that since we have a threshold cryptography, secret sharing, if a few of the nodes are compromised, it's no problem. The problem is that we have attackers that can compromise a majority of those nodes, and so they can actually compromise the whole root of trust of this distributed thing. First of all, because all of these nodes, after all, run on Windows machines, a few machines on which some attackers have vulnerabilities at the CPU level, OS level, or even a fabrication vulnerabilities. And so they can actually control this and bring it down at any minute. So that's arguable, number one. But even if that was perfect, we have the endpoints which are completely broken from the browsers, which are at least 100 times larger than it's even verifiable. The fact that Firefox OS is open source, that matters nothing because it's such a large code base. There is no way, even if you have hundreds of millions of users, that you can verify it enough to know that there's no critical vulnerabilities. And the same goes to the operating system and so on and so forth. So unless the endpoints are tackled at the server side, even the ones running the blockchain, but mostly the ones we use to interface with the web, then we have no hope whatsoever to have any shred of privacy or anything. So there's been this hype that blockchain now would solve all the problems of IT security. There's been many venture capital like Blue Yard that invested tons of money in this, and they invest in the fact that Bitcoin, even if it cracked, then it comes back up. So they just care about going to the next round of financing and get their money back. So there's a huge hype around this, which is deflecting from the fact that all our systems are completely broken, and we should start from creating micro browsers with microsystems. So anyway, that's.
Well, that's depressing. But pretty hard to argue against at a complete broad level. But there are some things that I think are going for us. We haven't seemed to have broken basic encryption. Encryption is still, at least based on all the Snowden reports, we still have public key encryption still works. That if you were to make it such that anybody that reads a website is now a server of that website, then we have a very large number of places that things are going on. So basically you would not have the number of Tor nodes be dozens or hundreds or thousands. It would be anybody that participates. If to read, you write. That happens. Is reader privacy really hard to try to get to work? Absolutely. And I can't say that any of this stuff solves that. I'm not a cryptographer enough. We just have to make it harder. And so just try to basically make it so that you don't have to just stand in one place to be able to find it all out. So I think I'm a bit more optimistic than that, but I see it as incremental. We have to find enough of a reason to go and build these things, and there's WordPress, but decentralized. But there's two other approaches, two other killer apps there might be. One is scientific publishing, which is innately broken in the sense that it's sort of going off into one database, like Elsevier or Springer is the one place that things live. You can't go and get multiple copies. So the death of Aaron Swartz, of basically being guilty of reading too fast in a library, is something that I find haunting. So the idea of having scientific publishing, not just be PDFs behind, a book behind glass, but to actually have it be a website that has software and data bundled into it, and have that be able to be multi-homed. There are large-scale funders and people interested in trying to make that work. Another is sort of blogs that are decentralized. And a third would be, how do you make money? If I were possible to make a rock and roll band where maybe one of my tracks would be available for free, but the other tracks you have to put a coin in a box somehow or another, and I get the decryption key to be able to then have the rest of the music in this thing, yes, I could go and make my own thing and start to republish it, but that's dorky if you make it easy enough to go and make it so people can pay attention to the law. People tend to. So if we could make it so that you don't have to sign up for an iTunes or an Amazon or a PayPal or all this crap. There's been these platform plays that have just been devastating towards the building of the web. I think those are three potential applications. So I'm a little bit more optimistic. Tom?
Who owns JavaScript? Who controls it? Who maintains it? Or is it already robust at infinitum?
Who owns JavaScript? I don't exactly know. It's a standard at this point, and so it's built into the different, and there are engines that run on them, but they're already being replaced by a thing called WebAssembly, which is really, you know how I said that there was cross-compilation going on into JavaScript? It's a source code to source code translation. That it even works at all is pretty phenomenal. But what's going on is now WebAssembly is an assembly language that can be distributed over the web that has firewalls built into it, so it is relatively safe to go and download this stuff and run it, because it'll be how Google Docs works. So even JavaScript is being obsoleted and moved forward mostly in open standards. So the good thing about these open standards is that they kind of work, but they have, I think, locked down the evolution of the web to make it very slow to make progress. And if you had a good things written in JavaScript, as Tim Berners-Lee said, as polyfill, we can go and evolve the infrastructure of the web very, very fast, which has been very slow up till now because we have to get it through these browser companies. So if we can go and separate our browser with a layer of fixable, downloadable code that can be updated very quickly, we can have new experiences very rapidly. Ash?
So, in order to make this work, you need probably publishers to buy into this vision.
You have to have users.
You have to have users, but
You have to have users, not just readers. You have to have writers.
yeah.
We're also trying to figure out if we can go and pour the existing web into this, which I could use help on this. We actually have a copy of the web. We have a lot. So it might be kind of an interesting way of being a proxy to go and make, because we can make all of that content addressable. So we have already 500 billion pages. That would be a good seed. And if things started to be used, it would start to be copied around the net.
My question is, how do you give people a reason to use it? So people care a lot about fun. Many people, I would argue, care less about reliability and about privacy.
Yes.
At least on a day-to-day basis. So how do you get people to switch it over?
It's a struggle. I don't have the answer. What I was impressed by is by going and doing this clarion call, putting out this talk about a year ago, white paper, calling people together. People came from all over the world. That there are actually people that are deeply interested in it, and they're often deep geeks. But they're interested in these are some of the sorts of people that I remember from the late 80s, early 90s involved in the building of things that became the World Wide Web. These are people that understand architectures and structures, and they want something a bit better than what we've got. Because what we've got now is a viral disease problem, can really bring it all down. I mean, when I look at sort of what's the existential threat to the Internet Archive, it's probably this. And it's an iPhone. It is locked at every layer, right? You have to have permission to go and have an app on it. You want to go and update the operating system and add something to it, that's called jailbreaking. Jesus. And it has these, and we have a network stack that's owned and controlled and bugged by people that you don't even know. Some of it's government, some of it's not. So I'd say, another company that's here is building sort of the downfall of the web, and people will go to it because they might be able to make a little bit of money because it's got a money system built into it. If the cool kids move to that, then the web will become about as interesting as FTP, or something like that. So let's keep the cool and interesting things, the edgy stuff going on in the open world. And there are more people than you think. But this pitch is to not the masses. This pitch is to Stanford. It's to Berkeley. It's to Chaos Communications Camp in Germany. This is still sort of the types of people that can even think of quite how you can have what content addressability means and how that evolves. That's not a large group right now. So maybe I'm sorry for bringing such an experimental thing to you guys. Yeah.
So the first one is, so distributed web, I'm assuming is the domain. So you have such that I will get web pages about this effort.
The best I would suggest is the decentralized WebSummit. So there's distributed is probably not the right word. Decentralized is actually sort of the more technically precise. So decentralized WebSummit, I would say, is the best set of papers and the like on this subject.
The third question is, how far are you in the effort?
Very, very early. It's a call. It's a call at this point. But at least there are people that have been working on this now for man years to try to take their projects and make it all work together. So this is not a product announcement. It's not. This is a call. And given that we're seeing some of these problems in journalism around being paid, that's a problem. Being able to publish and have your, sometimes that's a problem. You end up being killed. Or being read is sometimes a problem based on people that can stand in the way. I've just been finding it interesting that basically countries are just turning on and off websites as large as archive.org just because of one video. And it's just the chutzpah that's going on is indicating that we have something changing at the nature of the whole internet experiment that we've been trying to live for the last 20, 30 years. Depends on how old you are. Yeah.
So one of the things that seems to be a potentially central gating item doing a lot of this when you say pouring your archive into the new system
Yes.
is the whole legal code, copyright. And it really gets to the essence of this intellectual property idea. What's the kind of the cutting edge thinking in the legal community about like who owns our mind, who owns the web, who owns this material? So obviously if you can make a library, like you were
right,
that there's some fairly important nuances. And maybe you could tell us the kind of the cutting edge thinking.
Gosh, I just came out of a conference last week that sort of the digitize and lend approach is starting to work. So format shifting. So if you take floppies, the idea of moving those into digital form is now basically accepted, which is kind of interesting. But even doing it for books, so going and taking say you have 10 copies of a particular book at a library like Stanford, digitize it, and then have 10 copies circulating because there's only one reader at a time. So trying to use some of the analogies of the constrained environments of the old towards dealing with the digitized environment is starting. That's just something that's coming about, which I think is pretty interesting. So we're starting to see law review articles on this approach towards having a decentralized system as opposed to, say, what Google built, which was a digitize it all, put it into a database, go and start up a rights organization, try to get it through with a class action lawsuit, which is called the Google Book Settlement, and it was deemed monopolistic and got shut down. So is there a mechanism of building a decentralized mechanism of information distribution that still protects having people make some money?
Yeah, we talked about how the Apple mobile phones now they took over because they made publishers
You can get paid. Yeah, they made it so you can actually get paid.
About the fact that they created a platform in which you had security for the publisher, And actually, you also add more security for the user as well, because now a iPhone app is relatively more secure than a browser and a web application, because with JavaScript and so on. So these two things, and were the major drivers that made so that Firefox OS never went anywhere, and so the web couldn't really compete as a platform on the mobile. That's something that could still be done today. So the open web with open source could have competed on the basis of being more secure through transparency, but they never took that opportunity, because having code open is not enough to provide more security.
Okay.
Unless the code is small enough and verified enough so that you can say, yeah, it's transparent, so you don't have to trust me, and it's more secure than the other. That hasn't been done today and can be done. So I'm not pessimistic. I'm just saying that that's what should be done. And it's
I think it's really worth. I think it's worth investing in the open world. I mean, I've spent my whole career at this. I've done very well investing in the open, but it's not necessarily something, given the opportunity to monopolize or to constrain or make proprietary what was, fence off the commons. People will do it every time. Well, not all people will do it. There will be some of us that see that there's a real role to not do that, and we want that world. Yes, Tom.
You said you asked how would we get people to use this, okay, and what's the motivation for using it? And I think it comes back to money, because all of the platform companies want you to come to the platform. Publisher come to the platform, buyer come to the platform. Platform will service you and distribute payment, but all the money flows through the platform.
Yep.
In a distributed web, if people can do business with each other in a small business way, if the distributed web enables me to make money from that person over there that I've never met, and from that person over there that I've never met, which is not enough money to interest a big cloud, that's a motivation.
Yep. And as weird as the Bitcoin people are, it is an amazing piece of technology, and it just needs a killer app that isn't, crappy. So this might be something. People do want to make money. People want to pay money even. Let's just make it easy. Ooh.
Because I actually was arguing, I'm a privacy lawyer, by the way, and I can answer you about this question about the people and whether they care about privacy. Well, it doesn't matter whether they care about privacy, because the society can make you care about privacy. I think that's how it goes. But I'm actually arguing that the Internet of Things is going to move towards decentralized web. So, what do you think?
Gosh, I don't know. Let me think about that. That's. I mean, right now, the Internet of Things was most recently in the news by basically sponsoring a little botnet to went and tried to bring down the DNS system on the East Coast of the United States, which is, I don't know, we're sort of living in Black Mirror world, and so. Yeah, let's make these things better. There's certainly going to be lots of Internet of Things and Internet of Agents just sort of running around. Right now, they're still tied to physical objects. They won't be long. These things are just going to be running around. So let's do our homework and build good bots. But and then. Yeah.
You spoke for the content addressable web.
Yes.
Can you explain what it does to the internet transport system, the way traffic flows?
Yes. Good. Content addressable web has two components to it, as I understand it. One is if you know the file that you're trying to get. If somebody hands you a name of a thing, of a file, a GIF, an HTML page, a piece of JavaScript or something, they don't actually have to pass you the whole thing. They can just tell you a hash of it. Then you have to go and find it. Okay. There's another thing, which is, what about a mutable thing like your home page? Your home page changes. So if you had a particular hash, you'd find the particular home page that could never change. So there's these two things. There's a hash that gives you exactly what you're asking for, and then there's another thing which tends to be used as a public key that basically says, I want a thing that was signed in a particular way. Not that it has this content, I want one that has a signature like it. So those are the two types of requests that have to be able to be serviced. And the question is, how? So there are distributed hash tables structures for going and getting, asking the open net to be able to return a particular string, and it is optimized so you don't have to ask all nodes to be able to find it. I think that's going to be way too inefficient. I mean, whenever I use BitTorrent, it's slow as hell. I mean, it just takes a long time to get going, right? It's not like it's going to be really fast. So let's imagine we have something more like supernodes for most content. So supernodes are like from the Skype world. Some nodes turn into supernodes, right? Your computer, when you were running Skype before it was owned by Microsoft, it would if you were well connected, you turn into a supernode and go and start offering things. We can take that idea and make those into caches. There are people that want to operate as caches. For instance, the Internet Archive wants to. We can support an awful lot of web use, but not all web use, but we can do a lot. ISPs also want to make their users have a very fast experience. So if you're an ISP having a petabyte, which is about this large and costs about $50,000 of computers, a petabyte's still a lot. That is a simple, easy thing to do such that your users would go and ask your node first and be able to get responses. You would basically build a CDN that would be dynamically updated and able to be joined into by anybody serving the protocol. It's basically taking the Amazon cloud and democratizing it, or these the content distribution networks, and make anybody be able to start caching and offering it to even a relatively small number of people. And the idea of serving off of these machines, I've done out the calculations, there are little papers on it. You can keep a full 10 gigabit wire busy off of a small number of machines in a content addressable way. Computers are fast enough to be able to go and do the lookups that fast, so you don't have to say a file name anymore, which is what we had to do 20 years ago. You can actually keep the network busy based on a small number of machines. Are people incentivized to go and build these cache systems? Yes, I would say they are. But people like us are going to get takedown requests at a velocity of things that people don't want us to have, so we have to be able to eliminate those. And then so the basic slowness will come in if you're in a very unpopular site, or a unpopular because it's secretive, then it may take you longer to find it based on the distributed files, the distributed hash table structures that underlie things like BitTorrent. So I think of the decentralized distributed hash tables as the fallback, and the cache system as the way to actually make this thing go fast.
I am supplementing that way.
Yes?
Under a fully implemented model, as you explained, would content takedowns or domain seizures be possible, either technically or politically?
Very, very difficult. So you can go and contact the caches, the major law-abiding citizens, and go and say, if you have these hashes, make them go away.
And make the content slow to be served, but it will still be fine.
As long as somebody out there has got it, and then yes. And then the question, can you then bounce it through a couple of nodes so that it sort of has the same guarantees of Tor to go and try to anonymize where it's coming from.
So you brought up takedown requests. So part of what I'd like to know is how the archive handles takedown requests, but also how does that relate to this? With very open distributed system.
Yeah, this is harder to take down.
Right.
The Internet Archive.
I mean,
Oh, they'll use all sorts of arguments.
Right.
It's encouraging of blank, and put your worst fears in blank, right? Death and destruction, babies, terror, or
Although
whatever.
it's true. I mean, if you select used, it could breach copyright, the industry, content production. So it's a true fear. It's a true concern. And you said it before. You said it that we should find a way for people to be paid for publishing. Right?
But I'm sure.
So this is a genuine concern. So we can't let blockchains. People are not trying even to solve it. They're just.
I think that we're still in the basic technology build of a content addressable world, and not so much in the blockchain. The blockchain is a very interesting, different technology, but the peer-to-peer is still.
I think we actually have a takedown request to end the lecture with a kind of applause that is fit for this kind of epoch-defining discussion where we have to really ask ourselves how we move forward, and thank you for pointing the way forward.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.